Something I've always wanted on my bucket list. 12 of us in one elevator. Okay. Here. This hearing of the Subcommittee on National Security, the Border, and Foreign Affairs will come to order. Welcome, everyone. Without objection, the Chair may declare a recess at any time. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. The Biden-Harris administration's open border policies have led to the worst border crisis in America's history. By a mile, millions of illegal immigrants have entered the United States under the Biden-Harris administration in a short period of time, affecting every community across the country. This was not the result of so-called root causes in Central America, as Kamala Harris has said. Individuals from all over the world have entered the U.S. Under the Biden-Harris administration. It's because they can. Obviously, we have the greatest country in the history of the world right now, I guess you could say, and it's not surprising that the whole world wouldn't try to come here. In the first 7 months of fiscal year 2024, nearly half of the inadmissible aliens encountered at the southwest border were from countries other than Mexico, the Northern Triangle countries, or were from the Northern Triangle countries and Nicaragua. I should point out that by the end of September, we already had the all-time record number of people coming across the southern border. So whatever we get across when the numbers are released in September will only add to the record. This crisis did not lack from result of authority. The Biden administration has all the tools it needs to end this crisis. For example, it can reinstate the Trump administration's policies that worked, such as remain in Mexico, and the detention rather than mass release of illegal immigrants. They could continue to build the wall, which a Border Patrol agent told us is a force multiplier in the mission to secure the border. The Senate border bill that Vice President Harris vows to sign into law certainly wouldn't have helped. It would have codified the catch-and-release policies of the Biden-Harris administration that caused this crisis in the first place and allowed up to 1.8 million illegal immigrants to enter per year before temporarily closing parts of the border. The Biden-Harris administration's refusal to secure the border and instead allow millions of poorly vetted aliens from all over the world to be released is not without cost, both human and economic. Illegal immigrants released into the U.S. by the Biden-Harris administration have gone on to commit violent crimes against Americans. These murders, rapes, burglaries, and violent assaults should never have happened. Under the Biden administration, foreign gangs are running rampant in our communities. It's not just MS-13. According to DHS, a new violent gang has spread from the communist regime in Venezuela, Trey Diargal, across the United States. This gang has been described as MS-13 on steroids. When a mob of illegal immigrants stormed the border in El Paso in March, over 100 were suspected members of the gang. The Biden-Harris administration has released 617,000 illegal immigrants with known criminal backgrounds. That doesn't even include the almost 2 million illegal aliens who evaded apprehension entirely. We don't know where these gotaways are, what their criminal histories are, or what their intentions are. In addition to the real tragic costs of the border crisis, there have been significant fiscal costs. Estimates show that despite paying some taxes, illegal aliens are a net drain on America. Experts estimate each illegal immigrant costs the taxpayer roughly $68,000. They use more public services than they contribute in taxes. The Biden-Harris administration's weak job growth numbers are further diluted by the fact that the majority of those jobs have gone to foreign-born workers. In the past 12 months, U.S.-born workers lost more than 1.3 million jobs, where foreign-born workers gained over 1.2 million. I'll tell you, during the first 20 years of my political career in Wisconsin, I would again and again have the lobbyist for the Carpenters Union in my office begging us to do something about all the illegal immigrants here using Social Security cards, stealing the jobs, the good union jobs, my friend would say, stealing the good union jobs from carpenters. There's already a housing crisis in this country. Estimates that state that the U.S. is 4 to 7 million housing units short of where they should be. So not only do illegal immigrants compete for Americans for jobs, but also compete with Americans for housing. the Biden-Harris administration mass release of illegal immigrants in our country is not in the interest of the American people. We cannot afford 4 more years of a chaotic border. I should point out that in America, we are not anti-immigrant. Every year, about 850,000 new citizens are sworn into our country. If you look at it, sometimes there's a spike, but if you look at it in 3-year increments, there has never been a time in our history in which we have had more people sworn in as new immigrants. And what do we get for being so gracious and allowing so many people in this country? We get kicked in the face by having all other people come here anyway. Well, there's my opening statement, and I'll call upon my ranking member, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses also for being here. You know, I think that obviously all folks in Congress, Republicans, Democrats, want a safe and secure border. I think what we have are different approaches to how we treat immigrants, a humane system, and ensuring that we don't go back to a process that was inhumane to people that are oftentimes struggling and just seeking a better life. We don't want to go back to family separation, to Muslim bans, to undermining our asylum system, and we know we can achieve a comprehensive goal that both has a secure border, but also a plan for immigrants that are here in this country and that are working hard to contribute to our economy and to our country. Now, legal pathways to ensure an orderly and humane process are important. Now, I strongly support legal immigration because we are a nation of immigrants. Immigrants are some of the most patriotic people I know in our country. They make our community stronger, they work hard, they build our country. I'm an immigrant. I came to this country as a young child. I love America. I think it's the best country on earth. When I raised my right hand, it was the proudest day of my life, and I'm giving back to this country. I try to every single day. And the same is true for everyone in my family who are also immigrants. But I also want to be clear why I think we're here today. It's because some folks in Congress, and certainly Donald Trump, think that bashing immigrants will win this election. Now, 2 weeks ago, during a bizarre debate performance, we saw, of course, the former president repeat manufactured conspiracies about immigrants, and in this case, Haitian immigrants in Ohio. As we now remember his horrible quote, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets of the people that live here, and this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. Now, we know that's been completely debunked. The Republican governor of Ohio, the Republican mayor of the city manager, and now even the woman that first made the claim, who's also a Trump supporter in Springfield, all have said that this was not true. Yet the lie continues to be repeated. J.D. Vance and other members of Congress have continued to amplify this xenophobic lie, and it's a shame. And we know it gets worse. We know that Haitian immigrants in Springfield also are overwhelmingly there on legal work permits. They're actually there legally, and were invited by the state and the city to work. But that hasn't stopped J.D. Vance and Donald Trump from threatening to revoke their status and to allow a mass deportation agenda. Now, Donald Trump's rhetoric has been dividing us and stoking anti-immigrant hate, I believe, since he first came down that escalator in 2015 to announce that he thought Mexicans were rapists and murderers. And he says families like mine and other immigrants are poisoning the blood of this country. Those are the facts. Now, I'm glad to say that the American people, however, don't buy that. A CBS poll found that only 1/3 of voters approve of Trump's claims about immigrants, and almost 65% believe his recent claims are false, which we know that they are. But here are some more facts. Donald Trump is not interested in border security. He killed the bipartisan border deal that was in front of the Congress. And the Biden-Harris administration has taken robust action to secure the border, and we're now seeing the results of that. And there's no immigrant crime wave, and I have to respectfully disagree with the chairman. In fact, our nation is safer today and has less crime today than it did when Donald Trump left office. Those are the facts being reported by police departments across the country. And finally, I'll reiterate, I believe immigrants are inherently part of this country. They're the backbone of our country. They make our country safer, stronger, and better. With that, I yield back.
I've got to respond
Mr. Chairman,
a little bit.
I move to strike.
I'm sorry.
I move to strike to speak.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would be hopeful that this would not be a Trump bash hating ordeal. But if the gentleman is going to speak, he ought to speak factually correct. The reason why the bipartisan, quote, bipartisan Senate deal was not done was because House Republicans, including myself and at least 30 other Texans, said we would not vote for it. It had absolutely nothing to do with Donald Trump. And so if the gentleman is going to make this all about politics, he at least ought to speak correctly instead of pushing falsehoods. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I just do want to comment on something, and I'm disappointed that my good friend, Congressman Garcia, would try to confuse the American public. I've been down at the border 8 times. When I go down there, I frequently talk to the people who are in charge of debriefing or doing a health inspection on the new immigrants. They have told me that it is common for women who are coming across the border to be sexually assaulted. That ought to concern us all. Instead, what has happened when you try to bring up this idea that we want to stop the sexual assaults of women coming across the border, some Democrats say that this is a racial thing to say. Well, the border is to a large extent controlled by ruthless gangs. And it is very sad that the women who come here are being sexually assaulted. I don't know. Apparently, you're not supposed to say it or you're going to be accused of racism. It has nothing to do with racism. Yeah. It is pointing out, including all the other problems that you have with this massive border crossing, you are having women being assaulted by the Mexican gangs south of the Rio Grande. And if you go down there and talk to the people in charge of debriefing or whatever you'd say, the people coming across, they will tell you that. So it is not a racial statement. Donald Trump cares about women and does not like to see these women who are coming here sexually assaulted.
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And first of all, this is all a point of order. I mean, this is not a part of the way the hearing procedure works. But I will just respond. I do want to ask unanimous consent, since we're having this into the record, a September 17th, 2024 article from Fox News titled, "Border Patrol Apprehends 58,000 Migrants in August, down from the record 250,000 in December." And so let's be also clear that it was the bipartisan border deal, which I was discussing, that President Biden got put in, that's actually dropped migrant crossings. Now we're back to historic lows because of that. And so everything I said was also factually correct. I think it's important to call out people that are also demonizing immigrants, and it's important that we stick to the facts. So I was just purely responding to that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So
Without objection.
if we're just going to have a discussion, I'd like to weigh in.
So are we going to go back to regular order, or?
I guess we should go back to regular order. We will go back to regular order now.
That's too bad. I wanted to weigh in, as long as everybody's weighing in, freestyle.
Big, so I see has great things to say. Well, your time to ask questions will be coming up soon. I'm pleased to introduce our witnesses today, Dr. Steve Camarota, Director of Research for the Center on Immigration Studies, leading researcher on immigration issues. His work has been featured in national publications, including the New York Times and Washington Post. Look at that. You got a guy from the New York Times and Washington Post. Chris Clem served over 27 years in the U.S. Border Patrol in multiple locations across the border and at headquarters. He retired as the Chief Patrol Agent in charge of the Yuma sector in Arizona on December 31st, 2022. And Adam Isacson, the Director of Defense Oversight at the Washington office in Latin America, which monitors U.S. cooperation with Latin American security forces as well as other security trends. I want to thank you for being here to testify today. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witness has answered in the affirmative. Thank you. You may take a seat. Now, we'll go to Mr. Camarota.
First, I'd like to thank the subcommittee for inviting me. As you say, my name is Stephen Camarota. I am Director of Research at the Center for Immigration Studies. My testimony today will focus on the impact of illegal immigration on housing, public coffers, and American workers. But let me first turn to the unprecedented scale of recent illegal immigration. House Judiciary just last month reported that 5.6 million illegal immigrants have been released into the country since January of 2021. These are all inadmissible aliens under various categories. There has also been 1.7 million gotaways at the border in fiscal year 2021 to 2023. We don't know what it is for 2024. These are all people observed entering illegally but not stopped. Visa overstays also appear to be at record levels, but we don't have all the data. Now, all of these numbers represent new additions to the illegal immigrant population. But of course, mortality, outmigration, and legalizations each year offset these numbers to some extent. Still, I conservatively estimate that the illegal immigrant population has grown by 4 million since January of 2021, based on data collected by the Census Bureau. This is almost certainly the fastest it's ever grown. All this immigration, all this illegal immigration, has consequences. Turning first to housing, prior research shows that by increasing demand, immigration drives up cost for housing. My own analysis suggests that a 5 percentage point increase in the share of a community comprised of recent immigrants will cause a 12% increase in what the average U.S.-born household pays in rent. Bottom line, this influx has impacted housing. Turning to the fiscal impact, using estimates developed by the National Academy of Sciences, we calculate that the lifetime fiscal drain, considering all the taxes an illegal immigrant may pay and all the services and costs they would create, is about $68,000 per illegal immigrant, or if you like, $68 billion for each 1 million illegal immigrants. This drain is primarily due to the modest education levels of most illegal immigrants. An estimated 79% have no education beyond high school, which is about double the share of the U.S. born. This results in low average incomes, tax payments, and along with a significant amount of use of public services, including welfare programs, which they often receive on behalf of the U.S.-born children. But this drain is not because illegal immigrants are lazy. It is not because they all came for welfare. Most illegal immigrants, in fact, work. Rather, it simply reflects what happens when you add large numbers of less educated people who have modest incomes to a modern economy that spends a lot on social services. Finally, let me touch on the labor market. First, the idea that illegal immigrants only do jobs that Americans don't want is false. Of the 474 occupations as defined by the Department of Commerce, only 6 are majority immigrant, and we could find none that look to be majority illegal immigrant. There's good evidence that immigration, by increasing the supply of workers, reduces wages and employment for some American workers, though distinguishing the impact between legal and illegal is always challenging. But perhaps the most important thing to think about is this immigration is occurring in the context of the well-documented long-term decline, increase in the share of working-class U.S.-born men not in the labor force. And they don't show up as unemployed because they're not actively looking for work. Let me give you one example. About 1 out of 9 U.S.-born men, 16 to 64, with no education beyond high school, was not in the labor force in 1960. By 2000, it was 1 out of 4. Today, of these working-age men, it's about 1 out of 3. Job competition with illegal immigrants is only part of the reason for this. However, tolerating large-scale illegal immigration has allowed employers and, frankly, policymakers to ignore this huge social problem. After all, why care about all the working-age Americans on the economic sidelines if we can just hire eager immigrants? But the huge increase in American men not in the labor force is linked to significant social problems, from drug overdose deaths to crime to suicide and alcoholism. Reducing illegal immigration would help force the country to deal with this huge problem in our labor market. Thank you.
Mr. Clem?
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Chris Clem. I'm a retired Chief Patrol Agent of the U.S. Border Patrol. Began my career in 1995 in Lordsburg, New Mexico as a GS-5 Border Patrol Agent trainee and retired 21 months ago as a Senior Executive Service Chief Patrol Agent in Yuma, Arizona. Therefore, my responses and testimony today will be based on the best recollection of my experiences and observations over the last 28 years. I spent most of my career along the southwest border, where I was a canine handler, collateral duty intelligence officer, firearms instructor, and I spent a few years in Washington, D.C. and New Orleans, Louisiana. I was a career government employee who served under 5 presidential administrations, starting under Clinton and ending under Biden. I was not a political appointee. I promoted through the ranks through competitive process and commanded 4 Border Patrol stations across New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. I served as the Deputy Chief Patrol Agent in New Orleans sector, El Paso sector, and the Acting Chief in Big Bend sector before I was promoted to the Chief Patrol Agent in Yuma, Arizona, 2 years before I retired. I spent time as an agent in remote locations as well as urban environments, and I can tell you, if you've been to one station, you've been to just one station. If you've been to one sector, you've been to one sector. Each location is different in its own set of unique circumstances, from terrain to infrastructure to communities and to threats. However, the one thing that is consistent across the spectrum: without border security, our agents, our community, the migrants, and our country are vulnerable. While immigration and border security are closely related, they are not mutually exclusive. However, without proper border security in the form of physical security, Border Patrol agents, strong policies, and consequences, the integrity of the immigration system is compromised, and the founding principles surrounding the rule of law can suffer. My statement and testimony today will be focused on border security, to which I would be considered a subject matter expert. Immigration, as mentioned, is related, but can only be effective and efficient when the border is secured. This committee and Congress have access to all the available data, and the staunch difference between the previous administration and the current is gut-wrenching and jaw-dropping. I understand not every threat to our great nation will come directly across the border, but why would we be willing to even risk it? We know there are countless gaps and vulnerabilities created along the border, specifically our southern border. We are on the heels of recent testimonies from the FBI director that indicate threats are real. With hotspots around the world and what have happened under the current administration, there are more than enough reasons to secure our border and put back in place the plan as intended to include infrastructure, technology, and policies. We need the wall installed and completed where it makes sense. We need the technology installed as intended, and we need to increase the number of Border Patrol agents and border security personnel as requested by senior field leaders. It's also my opinion that a border security bill should be submitted as a standalone bill. This bill should be based on the needs of Border Patrol field chiefs as required by their agents to complete our security mission. In addition to the physical needs to secure our border, our agents' fleet is in dire straits, with upwards of 50% needed replacement. Our agents, when fully operational, spend more than half their time in their vehicles doing their job. We need to focus on funding on fleet and facilities for our agents, intelligence and administrative staff, not just migrant processing. We must give our agents back the purpose of mission and use funding appropriately to support them over the inadmissible aliens. Immigration and Customs Enforcement investigations and detention agencies should also be included in this package. It is when this bill is signed into law, and then and only then should we have a separate immigration system overhaul. This will allow border security solutions to stand on the principle of American security and minimize the trade-offs over outside interests for immigration reforms. A standalone border bill that addresses the obligation of the government to protect its borders and people will not only make us safer, but will also give a much-needed boost to the Border Patrol agents who have had to be put in the middle of this nightmare with little support and advocacy from this White House. For years, while working for the U.S. government as a U.S. Border Patrol agent, and even more so today, I have said border security is national security and public safety. There have been far too many impacts to Americans and American cities by this border crisis to mention. I accept that immigration is emotional to so many, but we cannot conflate immigration with border security. If we took a strong focus on securing our border with real, proven solutions, we can make our country stronger and safer while reducing the risk as well as the impacts throughout the country, and then we can address the immigration needs of our country. We should always strive to remain that beacon of hope for those that are being persecuted and tortured, but beyond that, we should not put our country at risk. We can secure our border with common sense and compassion that keeps our country safe. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and while much of my testimony is similar to one earlier this year, the fact is that the fundamental needs of border security have still not been met. My full statement has been submitted for the record, and I look forward to your questions.
Chairman Grothman, Ranking Member Garcia, thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. I last testified in the House 10 months ago. Since then, the number of migrants entering Border Patrol custody has dropped by more than 3/4. Fewer people came to the border in July and August than in 9 different months of the Trump administration. As my written testimony explains, that's because 2 crackdowns have brought the numbers down for now, one in Mexico and one in the U.S. asylum system. Their effect won't be permanent, but they do give us all a moment of calm. Our hair is not on fire right now. We can have a chance to discuss better solutions. And I'm going to advise against even more crackdowns. Over and over again, regardless of who's president, when there's a crackdown on migrants, the curve always shows a dive, a bottoming out, and then a recovery. You can see a chart in my written testimony of the past 10 years, crackdown, recovery. Even during the Trump presidency, migration rose twice. You had sort of the caravan and family asylum seeker period in 2018 and 2019, punctuated by family separations in 2018, but that didn't make that much of a difference. In mid-2019, Remain in Mexico did bring the numbers down, but then that had leveled off by the fall. And into spring 2020, it was leveled off, and then COVID came and closed the world's borders. The second increase was the last 8 or 9 months of the Trump administration. Title 42 was in effect, but from April 2020 onward, every month was greater than the last. Border Patrol apprehensions tripled from May to October, an absolute hockey stick change. Joe Biden inherited more than 70,000 encounters per month, nearly a quarter more than there are right now. President Biden kept Title 42 in place. His administration expelled 2.5 million people. By the way, Remain in Mexico under Trump, 71,000 people. But people kept coming. One of the toughest crackdowns ever didn't stop them. Why? The answer has to do with the futility of fighting against geography and fighting against the law of supply and demand. My written testimony discusses that more. So now, while crackdowns don't work, I'll be clear, I also don't want to see huge numbers of people coming to the U.S.-Mexico border. Those people you see coming in to turn themselves into Border Patrol, they're doing that because applying for asylum requires you to be physically on U.S. soil. In order to get to U.S. soil, most of these people, they go through absolute hell. I'm amazed by the desperation of moms I've seen pushing strollers at the entrance to the Darien Gap, the determination of people who just keep going, even after being kidnapped and tortured by Mexican gangs and corrupt police. But it's heartbreaking. This route encourages and enriches bloodthirsty organized crime groups. So how do we break out of feudal crackdowns and also, at the same time, break out of forcing people to come to the border? First, with reforms to how people can come here. We need to be able to make clear that a process exists, that there's a line that people can get into, even though it may take a while. Right now, there's virtually no process, no line. Just because someone might not qualify for asylum doesn't mean that they and their family don't have a lot to offer for our communities and our economy. Our immigration laws, though, haven't fundamentally changed in 34 years. I'm talking 1990. I was 20 that year. I'm kind of a techie kind of guy. I didn't even have an email address in 1990. This is a very long time ago. Residency, work permits, refugee admissions have changed very little since the first Bush administration. We need to modernize, and if we did, we'd have a lot less people making this dangerous journey to access our asylum system at the border. Second, though, as troubled as it is, we still have to defend that asylum system. We shouldn't put asylum out of reach like H.R. 2 would do. That's for 4 good reasons. First, asylum exists for an important historical reason. It's a legacy of World War II, when countries turned away many people fleeing the Nazis and Stalin, and those people died. Much of the world said never again, including the United States. Reason 2, a lot of people really do qualify for asylum. In our immigration courts this year, 48% of asylum cases ended with grants of asylum or other protection. That's hundreds of thousands of lives saved over the years. Reason 3, we've kept our asylum system so anemically underfunded that it's overwhelmed. Wait times for a decision are routinely several years. And then that overwhelm, that wait time, it becomes its own draw. But this is fixable. It's an administrative problem. How? Get processing off of Border Patrol agents' to-do lists so that they can get back on the line. About 1,000 processing coordinators have been hired, people who don't need a full course of academy training to do paperwork. That's a start. Get case management in place so that you can keep people in the system. And most of all, hire judges and asylum officers so that caseloads go down, backlogs go down, people get fair decisions in their cases, but the cases happen so quickly, even with fairness, that people with weaker cases don't try. Reason 4, as I said, our immigration laws are so outdated that asylum is the only door open for many people. We have to fix that. That's the reality. So now we've got this lull in migration at the border, let's talk about new ways forward. I think that we can do that perhaps once the election cycle ends. Thank you, and I look forward to discussing this further.
Thank you. I'll start off with 5 minutes. Mr. Camarota, I want you, or Mr. Clem, right, as I'm under the impression that every year about 850,000 new people are sworn as American citizens. Is that an indication to you that people can't come into this country if they wait under the current system?
Right. Obviously, the number of naturalized U.S. citizens is at a record high, both the number...
A record high.
Right.
Never higher. Way higher than 1960, You know, the golden years or 1950, not even close, right?
All right, yes, the U.S. legal immigration system is the most generous in the world if you look at how many people are admitted with a clear path to citizenship. So in that sense, we're extremely generous, and there are probably somewhere around 40 million foreign-born residents in the United States here legally.
Okay, that's not nobody.
No, not nobody.
President Biden and Vice President Harris have allowed, this for Mr. Camarota, have allowed in 7 million illegal immigrants into the U.S. since they first took office. Does this abrupt introduction of 7 million illegals strain public services and represent a fiscal challenge?
Yes, and as I said, it's not because illegal immigrants are lazy and don't want to work, or it's not because they're all on welfare. It's that people in a modern economy like U.S., and this is true of the native-born, there's no difference, who don't have a lot of education, and that represents the vast majority of illegal immigrants, don't make much money in this economy. They don't pay that much taxes, even if they have work authorization or are on the books. There are always exceptions, and they tend to use a lot of services, and that's especially true once they have any U.S.-born children.
Okay, I'll come back to something I said when I led off here. When I was a Wisconsin legislator, the carpenter union would again and again complain to me that they felt people were coming and stealing the good union jobs from other carpenters. Is this a problem today? Are they stealing jobs from Americans?
Well, the word stealing might be
Are they taking jobs that otherwise would go to law-abiding Americans?
Right, and by increasing the supply of workers, they certainly make employers happy, but that tends to have a downward pressure on wages, making jobs less attractive. And the real crisis in the U.S. labor market is all these people who are of working age who are not looking for work. They're not working, and they're not looking for work. And that is a 6-decade increase, and it's a social disaster. If we want to solve that problem, we have to curtail illegal immigration, let wages rise, and do a bunch of other things.
Yeah, I'm usually with the successful people in my district. I like successful people, but I always wonder how I should take it when they tell me we could, if we allowed more immigrants in this country, they wouldn't have to give so many raises. Is it right what my employers are telling us, that it's a way to hold down wages if we let more people, immigrants in this country?
Yeah, and you can sometimes even find employers who say things like that. A former CEO
Well, yeah, they
of
do.
Walmart
They do.
said something to that
They
effect.
don't like to give people 16 or 17 bucks an hour.
Or more.
They pine for the days when they could give 10 or 11,000. Thank God for Donald Trump that he was able to raise those wages. Mr. Clem, you have 27 years of border security as a Border Patrol agent and led the Yuma sector as Chief Patrol Agent. Vice President Harris, the borders are focused on the so-called root causes. Is it fair to say that the catch and release policies of the Biden-Harris administration, not issues abroad in foreign countries, have been actual and main cause of the border issue? And I think I'll ask you to look at this. You look at the number of people coming across, say, in the 90s or the 80s or the 70s compared to today. I don't think the world collectively is that much more dangerous. What is driving this big increase now compared to 10 or 20 years ago?
What I can tell you is that without consequences, people are going to keep coming, and that's one of the big challenges that we faced when I was chief. It's what we saw happening the latter part of my time in El Paso. When there is no room to detain somebody who has entered illegally, who has been placed in removal proceedings, and they are essentially caught and released, that is what we call a pull factor. So specifically in places like Yuma, where I was chief, we didn't have a lot of Central American and Mexican nationals coming across. We had people from all over the world, 116, 117 different countries. So the smuggling network, the trafficking network has got, tentacles all around the world. And so people were coming here knowing that once they crossed, they were likely not being detained beyond Border Patrol and be released, and could be released in the United States for several years before their initial hearing. So to me, that's a pull factor that is that's driving a lot of the people coming on our border today.
You would know the answer to this, and I mentioned it before. Are some of the women coming across that southern border sexually assaulted?
Absolutely.
A lot of them?
A lot. It's hard to quantify that, but I will tell you that most of the people that we talk to through our intel debriefs and to people that run victim assistance shelters will tell you that from day one, when they start their journey in the hands of the smuggling networks, from whether it's South America, Central America, or through Mexico, they are exploited. They are sexually assaulted. Many of them are taking birth control because they expect to be some kind of assault along the way.
It's that horrible.
Yeah.
You're giving minor girls birth control because they think it's almost predictable that they're going to be sexually assaulted, right?
Yeah, that's what we hear through our debriefs. Yes, sir.
Unbelievable. Well, okay, now I'll go on to my partner in crime here, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you. And I also agree, obviously, sexual assault, whether it happens anywhere, and certainly the border, I think, is sick, and we should do everything we can to stop that behavior. I think a lot of things have been said at this hearing, and I hear all the time about migration, what immigrants are doing, why they're coming here, but I also want to clear some of the misinformation that we've already heard today, but also it's important to clear up the facts about some of the data that's being used that I believe is actually incorrect, and I think that the facts make it clear. I do want to start with this chart, and Mr. Isacson, you presented some charts in your testimony. I want to use this one as well. So if we look at this chart, this is actually a chart that's often used by my Republican colleagues. Donald Trump uses this chart. It's pretty famous, and it shows the migration spike here over time. But the truth is that this chart is actually factually incorrect, and I think it's important to note and to point out how incorrect it actually is. First, it says that Trump left office in April 2020, right here, when migration was actually at its lowest point. We know that's actually not true. Can you actually tell us what happened in 2020 and why was there a huge decline at this point in the chart?
Sure. I mean, all of the world's borders closed everywhere in March of 2020.
Because of the COVID pandemic.
Exactly.
Right, except the Republicans who have used this chart over and over again, including in other committees, keep saying that's when Trump left office. Now, when did Trump actually leave office?
January of 2021.
That's right, and January of 2021 is actually right here. So I'll add an arrow to that.
Ooh, arrows.
So if you look at this chart, from here to here was all of during Donald Trump's presidency. So the increase in border crossings and the spike that you see beginning to happen actually happened when who was president?
That's right. Things are already going up, a lot of single adults, and then just after that, the world's borders really start opening.
That's right. And so obviously, the border crossings start increasing. Joe Biden then becomes president. And then something else happens that's missing in this chart. We had the bipartisan border deal. And then, as we know, border crossings actually begin to decrease. So I'm going to add actually where we are today. This is actually where we are today with these illegal border crossings. And so I think it's important that we actually stick to facts. This is incorrect. When Donald Trump actually left office, what was actually happening in 2020, and the addition to this chart, which is actually where border crossings are today, an issue solved by the Biden-Harris administration, just to be very, very clear. And Mr. Isacson, I also want to note that we've discussed contributions of migrants, contributions of crime, and I think it's important that we know, yes, Donald Trump killed the bipartisan Border Patrol deal. We know that. And there's also been attacks on immigrants that somehow there's some sort of crime wave that immigrants are causing. Right. I also want to use this chart. This chart, by the way, is compiled by data by the men and women in our local police departments across America. So police actually submit this information. Now, let me ask you, do you agree that the country's safer than it was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s?
Yes, it absolutely is.
Right, because this is actually our crime trends and actual homicide rates in the U.S., and this is where we actually are today. I do see a spike in crime, actually, in 2020, right over here. Who was president when that dramatic spike happened?
Donald Trump, but also COVID, yeah.
Right, but Donald Trump was president, exactly. And Donald Trump, actually, murder rates surged by 30% to the highest rate since the 90s, correct?
That's right.
Now, in 2021, when Joe Biden became president, violent crime rates have now begun to decrease. So I just want to point out also that when we talk about migrants, we're talking about what the impacts to national crime rate is, that crime has actually plummeted this year, and the Biden-Harris administration has actually made the country safer. And so we've invested in community policing, and again, they understand that immigrants can contribute to this country. But just to connect back to the border, do you see any correlation between the crime rate in this chart and trends in migration over the last decades?
No, I see no correlation at all.
Is it safe to say that migration does not bring crime to our country? Would you agree with that?
No, the studies I've seen show that the migrant population commits crime at a lower rate than the U.S.
And in fact, also, when you look at studies of migration, we know that migrants actually cause less crimes than natural-born citizens. That's also correct. Is that also true?
Yeah, I mean, of course, migrants do commit some crimes, but the rate is lower.
And if you commit a crime, you should be held accountable to that crime, of course, and we know that's also critically important. So I just want to thank you because I think facts matter. They're important. This is a nation of immigrants, and I think it's important to actually stick to the data and the facts. And with that, I yield back.
Mr. Sessions.
Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. Isacson, what does the city of New York think about their crime problem and immigration?
The city of New York has a homicide rate much lower than Washington's, and it's actually going down.
So that's what is that what the mayor says? Is that what the governor says? Is that what the people say?
The mayor made some warnings about a year ago that have not turned out to be correct about crime or disorder in the city.
So I'm mistaken that the governor and the mayor said that immigration was a problem and that they are seeking desperate help from the federal government because they've exceeded their ability to take care of not just the immigrants, but the criminal problem that they have. So I'm wrong.
About a year ago, like 2 years ago, they had a lot of people coming from Venezuela who did not have a lot of contacts and people that they could stay with in the United States. And they were at first a burden on the system. They are not anymore, and their numbers are way down.
So thank you for your testimony. Mr. Clem, Mr. Camarota, I've been told, no, it's not a problem in New York, not a problem in New York City. I'm wrong, Mr. Clem?
I wouldn't say you're wrong because we've seen the facts that we've had illegal immigrants that have been caught and released and transferred to New York City committing crimes. I'd also say you're not wrong because the mayor of New York City sent his team down to places like Del Rio, Texas, and Yuma, Arizona to see firsthand what was happening back in 2022. They obviously knew something was going on and were concerned for their constituents in their respective cities. So, yeah, you're not wrong.
There's certainly been high-profile crimes committed by illegal immigrants. And I've written on this question of the background rate of crime rates for immigrants and the U.S. born. It turns out the data is not very good. But let me just say this. Keep in mind the policy. Sanctuary cities, as a matter of policy, release people who've been arrested and are in jail. The one group of immigrants we know has a high crime rate are people who get arrested and are in jail. And when the ICE asks them to hold that person, they, as a matter of policy, often release. That's what a sanctuary city often does. That is extraordinarily foolish, even if you think that illegal immigrants, on balance, have a somewhat lower crime rate than other groups. Releasing people who get arrested is very foolish when ICE is willing to take them. And that's what these cities do.
Well, I'm willing to go before the House of Representatives on the floor and admit that I am wrong, that the mayor of New York City does not believe that, nor has over the last 10 weeks. I'm willing to go to the floor of the House of Representatives and admit that I was wrong, that the governor of New York encourages this, and that it's not a problem to the state of New York. That is not what I thought. And so, Mr. Isacson, I'll just apologize to you right now. You've told me I'm wrong. You've told me that the state of New York and the city of New York is perfectly safe, that the crime rates are lower.
I didn't say they're perfectly safe.
Yes, sir, you did. Because I gave you a chance to, and you told me it's lower today and that the immigrants have very little part of that.
I stand
and so
by that.
I'm going to admit I'm sorry. I am sorry that I have thought this, and I'm sorry. So I'm going to go and check the facts, but I'm going to admit to you that it's not what I thought. That I thought, just like in Philadelphia and a lot of other places, that the crime in Chicago, the crime as it relates to these Venezuelan gangs, is a real problem in criminal, to police officers, to cities, to the people of the city of Chicago. And I will tell you, I will apologize to you right now that you have corrected me as a professional witness giving testimony.
Look at the most recent data.
That you raised your hand. I didn't raise my hand. You did, and said you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
And I did.
So I know you did. I watched. So I will apologize right now to you. I'm going to go back home, and I'm going to double-check the facts. And I appreciate the gentleman very
Can I
much.
ask you to not pick anecdotal data and look at the most recent numbers?
Of
course, you're going to find evidence that migrants are committing
recent
crimes.
data-
But what's the rate?
Recent data, I asked about what the city of New York, the mayor, was saying. I asked what the
In 2024, the second half of 2024, you won't
Well, I
find as
didn't
much
say
on the
the
record.
second half. I didn't.
You said what
spec-
he's saying. That's current presently now.
Okay, well, I'm going to go check it.
What he said in
because-
2022 is something
Sir, I'm going
else.
to tell you I apologize because it is
Thank you, I
not what I
accept.
thought at all. and I will be glad to go check that. And, Mr. Chairman, I want to yield back my time.
Thank you. I'd like to also request, Mr. Chair, unanimous consent to enter 2 articles into the record. The first is an article entitled, "Immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than U.S.-born Americans, studies find." This was dated March 8th, 2024, from NPR. The second is an op-ed entitled, "Many Americans believe migrants bring fentanyl across the border. That's wrong and dangerous," end quote. That's from the LA Times, dated February 12th, 2024. Thank you.
Without objection. Andy Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's get to this thing. The Muslim ban that was mentioned. What countries were involved in the Muslim ban? Anybody know? I know. Anybody want to take a guess? I'll tell you who they were. Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, and North Korea. Is North Korea a Muslim country? No, it is not. What do those countries, 6 of those 7 countries, have in common? Actually, they have in common that 4 of them were on President Obama's DHS terrorist watch list. The other 3, the other 4 were considered terrorism safe havens. Only 12% of Muslims around the world were impacted. And besides that, and Mr. Clem knows this, Mr. Camarota knows this, I would hope Mr. Isacson knows this, there were exceptions for every one of those countries to come in, so there was not an absolute ban. Another lie told by the left. How about separation? This notion of separation. More than 325,000 unaccompanied children have been misplaced by this administration, admitted to. New York Times did a study. We had the director in, and she admitted it. That's a separation. You know what these guys got criticized for? There's about 4,000 people, kids that were separated, and they found them all, but a few. These guys can't find 325,000, but you're not going to hear my colleagues say anything about it. U.S. crime rate is not down, contrary to what you say. And why do we know that? Does LAPD report? No. Does New York report? No. Does Miami-Dade report? No. Do more than 6,000 police agencies obviate any reporting? That's the correct thing. They don't report. So when you say New York is down, guess what, friend? They don't report to the FBI anymore. They don't report anymore. They stopped reporting several years ago. Why is it? They've told me it's too hard to report. And so that's what you're relying on. You know what the CBP said about Tren de Aragua? Tren de Aragua is now moving into the Northeast. And they are. But crime is down for you. That's good for you, my friend. CBP numbers, you said they're way down. I'm looking at CBP numbers right here. I'm looking at them right here. And you know what I see? I see, let's see here. August of 2023, 304,000. They're down, you're right, almost 50%. They're down to 160,000. But you know what's interesting about that? Jay Johnson, Obama's DHS secretary said, look, if you have more than 1,000 a day, you've got a crisis. Mr. Clem, is that a crisis? You've been there. How many, in the last year that you were sector chief, fewer than 8,600 encounters in Yuma? Is that right?
In 2020, it was just approximately 8,800 arrests in Yuma. In 2021, it went up to 114,000. And then in 2022, it went up to 312,000. So we went up to over 1,000 a day just in Yuma alone.
Right. So if you take it, if you're standing on top of Mount Everest and you come down 1,000 feet, it may look like you've really descended a whole lot, but you ain't descended back to normal. And we're nowhere near normal. And that's the lie. That statistics that you guys are rallying around, it just blows my ever-loving mind. How about the bipartisan deal, the so-called bipartisan piece of crap deal out of the Senate? Mr. Clem, I read your statement, and what did you say? You said something like this. You said, it failed to address the border security requirements still needed by the U.S. Border Patrol. If enacted, it would codify a mandatory nationwide catch and release scheme for all populations. Anytime there is limited consequences of detention or removal, even returning to Mexico, incentivizes more people to make the dangerous journey. That dangerous journey, that's what's inhumane, is it not?
That's correct. The journey is dangerous.
And so the bill that you referred to as a better bill was H.R. 2, which has been languishing over in the Senate for over a year now. That was a bipartisan bill. That was a bill would have made significant changes along the border. Quit lying. Let me tell you, how about CBP1, the CBP1 app? How is that figured in? How's that counted in? Is that counted in your encounters? Between ports of entry or at the port? No, it's not counted in. And you know what? You know what those numbers are? And this will take you right back up to 2023 levels. 530,000 migrants, okay, that's the CHNV program. 813,000 came in under the CBP1. That takes you right back up to the 2023 levels, doesn't it not, Mr. Clem, Mr. Camarota? Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
And then when
Yes, if you add them together.
yeah, and then when you throw in the Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela numbers, now you're back right at maybe even a little higher than the 23 numbers. And that's the point that none of you all want to admit. You want to dance around it and you want to say, well, now they're legal. They got some kind of legal status. You know what they've got? They've got an illegal parole status, because parole under the INA is meant to be a singular, particularized parole status. But they've got categorical parole status here. And they know that's wrong, and that's where they should have stopped. And Mr. Chairman, my time's way over, but there's so much more to say here to rebut the crapola that we've heard here today. Yield.
Mr. Chair, since I know time went over, can I just add one thing?
If he's adding,
If
he's adding, I'm going to add. You got time before we started. I didn't get that time.
Oh, well, that's because I'm the ranking member.
Yeah,
of the
who
committee.
cares if you're the ranking member? If you ask for a regular order, then do regular order.
Thank you, sir. As ranking member, can I, since you had more time, just one quick thing. I just want to clarify that actually the gentleman is actually incorrect. Both the states of New York and California, the city of New York City, the city of Los Angeles, do send their reports and their crime reports, and they are included in the data. And so I just think that the facts are important, and I won't.
Yeah, they are. And so I demand time to
definitely-
respond to that.
I definitely
because
won't
he just
correct
called-
every.
called me
I
a
won't
liar,
correct.
so
I won't correct every
that
misstatement.
time. I want that
I did
time,
want to
Mr.
correct
Chairman.
those. Thank
Yeah,
you.
because if you look at the Marshall Project, the Marshall Project itself, which is not a conservative group, they will tell you, if you look at the FBI data, more than 52% of agencies don't report all of their data to FBI. And that's the facts. And facts are a stubborn thing,
Yep.
and doggone.
And lastly, like
go to Nancy.
having served as mayor for 8 years and had a police force of 600 police officers, did a great job. The city of Los Angeles, the city of New York, I can tell you, guarantee you, they report their
Nancy
data.
Mason.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And talking about extraordinary foolish, I know that was said earlier by one of our witnesses. It's not just cities, it's counties too. I've been nuking Charleston County Sheriff over the last 24 hours over her lies about the illegals that are in South Carolina, her lies about releasing them into our state, and that sort of thing. And when you're talking about New York, Mr. Biggs, if you talk to an NYPD officer, they'll tell you they're not charging these illegals with crimes. And then when they do, they're released, and they're not given a bail or a bond when they go out. And so the left, it's just all one big lie, and it's not right to the American people. And the statistic that crime is down for migrants, every illegal who is here illegally entered our country illegally. They literally committed a crime on the way in. So they are 100% guilty of committing a crime. Mr. Chairman, I brought a folder today because I'm going to enter in some documents into the congressional record this afternoon. So I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. I'm going to focus my time on the human costs of sanctuary policies from local officials, including Charleston County Sheriff, Sanctuary Sheriff Kristen Graziano, and I hope she's watching today. If she's watching, I hope you have a number 2 pencil and you take notes, because this is how I do my job. Charleston County Sheriff, the Charleston County actually in my district used to be a model for cooperation between ICE and local law enforcement. It is no more. Charleston County had a 287G cooperation agreement in place with ICE, acted as an over 72-hour detention facility for aliens apprehended by ICE, and worked together to enforce our nation's laws and keep our community safe. No more because of Sanctuary Sheriff Kristen Graziano. Unfortunately, in early 2021, the new sheriff of Charleston County, Sanctuary Sheriff Kristen Graziano, began a systematic effort to dismantle immigration enforcement in Charleston County. Sheriff Graziano
on her first day in office, terminated Charleston County's 287G cooperation agreement with ICE. She announced this in front of a taco shop. I don't know why. So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask unanimous consent to enter this picture of Sheriff Graziano terminating her 287G agreement in front of El Pencho Taco into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. I also would like to request unanimous consent to enter this photo. It's Sanctuary Sheriff Kristen Graziano's Twitter header. Here she is with wide open border czar Kamala Harris. Here she is with Joe Biden, who often loved to walk away from the podium and not take questions from press, just like Sanctuary Sheriff Kristen Graziano did today at her own press conference. I'm not sure who did it better, her or Joe Biden. Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter this.
Without
into the record.
objection.
Thank you. I would like to she refuses to notify, Sheriff Graziano refuses to notify ICE when a criminal illegal alien is in custody and refuses to provide adequate hold time for ICE to assume custody. I'm going to request unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, to enter her statement yesterday where she says, our policy clearly states on our public website we only hold residents for ICE if they have a I-247, a detainer immigration center signed by an immigration judge. That's per her office policy. I would like to enter her statement into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
In that same vein, I'm going to enter her own office policy that says she can and will release criminal illegal aliens into South Carolina. This is her policy she cites as the reason she does this. Did you know she wrote and signed off on her own department policy? It doesn't get any dumber than this. Literally is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in South Carolina history. Her department has been designated as a non-cooperative by ICE. Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter this list of non-cooperative institutions into the congressional record, sir.
Without objection.
All right, I'm running out of time. I'm going to enter in request for unanimous consent to enter this document from ICE. She called me a liar today, where she has released over 50 illegal immigrants into South Carolina, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
I would like to request unanimous consent to enter all my letters to Sheriff Graziano and ICE into the congressional record over her behavior.
Without objection.
And lastly, she called me a liar today, and she also said that crime has gone down, violent crime has gone down in Charleston County. Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask for unanimous consent to enter the SLED, State Law Enforcement Division's Crime in South Carolina annual report, where it shows violent crime is up. Murders, aggravated assaults, stolen vehicles, etc. It's up, it's not down, it's a lie. Mr. Chairman?
Without objection.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Paul Gosar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Chief Clem, how are you doing? Jonathan Lyons said to say hi to you.
Good afternoon, sir. Good to see you.
Good. You know, you've experienced more than probably anybody in this room, down in that Yuma sector. I have a small part of Yuma, but it's been overrun. I want you to talk about what was just found on our border, these 8 IEDs and the 4 Rucker-propelled grenades.
Well, I don't have that much fidelity anymore because I'm retired, but I can tell you what has been open source, and that is a place near La Nariz, which is in Sonoita, outside of Sonoita, Mexico. I would say about 40 miles southeast of Lukeville, Arizona. They're near Ajo, Arizona. And my understanding, it was less than 1/10 of a mile from the border. There was several IEDs and RPGs. More than likely, based on my experience, that is for cartel infighting, taking over land, using it to, embolden their operations over there. But being that close to the U.S. border, it is a threat. It's a threat to everybody in the region. It doesn't take much for somebody to turn an RPG or put an IED right there at the border and injure any of our CBP personnel or Border Patrol agents. So something like that close to our border is a concern. That's why I say it's more than immigration. It's border security, it's national security.
Right. You know, we haven't had anybody, and I'm being facetious here now, we haven't had anybody from the Middle East at all come across those borders, have we?
We've had them from all over the country, all over the world, 177 different countries, I believe, in the last few years. Yuma was no exception. We had plenty of people, over 116, 117 different countries during the 2 years I was chief there.
When you were chief, how many people were on the terrorist watch list that came through?
I actually led the nation in 2022 with 40 people that were apprehended that came across the terrorist screening database.
And those are the ones you just knew about, right?
Those are the ones we just knew about, yes, sir.
The gotaways don't count.
We have no idea who or what their intentions are.
What's your general feeling about cells in this country?
Well, I think we're fooling ourselves if we think that's not occurring, right? I think anybody with any law enforcement military background understands that the enemy is going to amass its army any way, shape it can. The fact that we've had close to 1.8 or 9 million gotaways with no idea who they are, and I'm sure a small percentage of them, or a majority of them, are not on a watch list, but it doesn't take many. But I would think that, fact of the matter is we've got concerns because we've got so many people from all around the world that have snuck into this country illegally that we don't know about.
Now, Yuma has been it's kind of out there, and they're all by themselves out there, right? And so they take an awful lot of, the locals are really doing the lowman's share of having to deal with these people, right?
That's correct.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your reactions or relationship with the sheriff there, Wilmot?
I'm very fortunate. I have a very good relationship with all the local leadership, the mayor, the sheriff, the county supervisors. We had to pull together as a community to handle the influx. We went, from I've mentioned earlier, in 2020, just over 8,800 arrests to over 110,000, 114,000 arrests, up to 300,000 arrests, 312,000 arrests in 2022. That took an entire toll on everything from the EMS service, the medical services, the food bank, law enforcement. We had to come together and build a team, a community team, using non-government organizations to help so we're not releasing people in the street in places like Yuma, Arizona, when it's 120 degrees in the summertime. And I was just there last week. I met with some of the same people, and there are still facilities like the hospital that still haven't recovered over $25 million, I think, in medical funds. And even the food bank is still having a hard time replenishing some of the stuff they had that they used to help with the migrant influx there.
And that food bank was one of the biggest in the state, right?
It's
huge.
Because of the migrant population and the agriculture in Yuma, they had a lot of support, and for that to get depleted was pretty impactful.
And if I'm not wrong, the hospital there, if you were a citizen who was pregnant, you couldn't get a labor or OBGYN to see you because they were all filled. You had to go all the way to Phoenix, which is a pretty hefty drive, right?
The CEO has made that statement of the hospital that because of a lot of the influx, people coming directly to the hospital that were in need of OBGYN or labor and delivery, they had to reschedule people that were planning to come in here for births, cesarean sections. Those things had to be canceled or rescheduled because of that. So yes, that is a factual statement.
I thank you very much, and thank you for your service. Appreciate you. And like I said hi for Jonathan Lyons. Thank you very much. I yield back.
In closing, I want to thank our witnesses once again for their testimony.
Mr. Chairman, I have some documents to submit.
Oh, yes. Mr. Biggs.
Thank you. For the record, I submit a document from Marshall Project entitled 4 Reasons We Should Worry About Missing Crime Data. Submit a report from the Homeland Security Committee called New Documents Obtained by Homeland Majority Details Shocking Abuse of CBP-1 app. A report from U.S. CBP and a Fox article referencing that report. Nearly 530,000 migrants came to the U.S., quote, legally and paroled into U.S. under controversial Biden program, and which also talks about the CHNV program as well as the CBP-1 program. I also include into the record the INA 212 D5A, which is the parole statute, which defines what parole is supposed to be. And then also access this morning the CBP statistical data with regard to encounters on the southwest land border alone.
Without objection. Yes?
I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record some information which I had used to prepare myself for today that obviously I'm told I'm wrong. From the U.S. News, migrants flooding New York City's justice system, making up 75% of arrests in Midtown as pathetic sanctuary laws handcuff cops. Second would be in the metro, migrants accused of crime still eligible for taxpayer-funded New York City shelters, the mayor of New York City admits after expose. Mr. Chairman, I'd ask these be included in the record of today's hearing.
Without objection, and without objection. Okay, my ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank our witnesses again, and as a reminder, Republicans and Democrats both want a safe and secure border. Clearly, we had an opportunity to pass a bipartisan Border Security Act. Was not able to happen, of course. We know that President Biden has taken executive action on that. Also, I just want to point out, it's important, I think, when we talk about migrants and we talk about crime, that we actually use facts, statistics, and crime data reported by police departments across the country. And also, once again, want to thank our witnesses for being here and wish everyone a good break. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming on over and testifying here. Trying what I can add. There's no question that we are at, in my mind, record numbers of people coming across the border for the current year. And you got to remember two new things, the CPB One app and the Cuba, Honduras, Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela program, which were not around 2 years ago, but now each are taking 125, one about 40,000 additional people coming here every month. So we are in a crisis never before. To say that this is like anything we've seen under President Trump is not true, and we have numbers on family units released, total encounters, all going up over time. I can tell you in my area, which is not a particularly liberal area, if I ask law enforcement how many people arrested who are here illegally, how many people in the jail are here illegally, how many people in a prison are here illegally, it amazes me what we don't know. Okay, I don't think those numbers are out here because they're not out here in Wisconsin. They're sure not out here in Arizona or Texas or somewhere. This is obviously going to permanently change America. We haven't got into ideas of people coming here. I mean, we have to, over time, have people who understand our Constitution, believe in our values. As said before, we're right now among record numbers of people who are being sworn in legally, naturalized, way, way more than in the 60s or 70s or 50s, not even in the same ballpark. And nevertheless, we let this fiction sit out here that it's, so difficult to come here. In any event, it is, to me, obvious anecdotally and from talking to my local law enforcement that people who are here illegally are committing crimes, and serious crimes, rapes, that sort of thing, which is horrific. It is obviously true that when you bring another 5 or 10 million people into the country and aren't building more housing, you're going to drive up the cost of the housing that you have. I can tell you from my district, even in Wisconsin, so far from the southern border, some school districts have had dramatic increase in the number of people there, which obviously is very expensive. And it's more expensive than any other child because you're dealing with the additional cost connected with people not being able to speak English. But that's going up as well. So I appreciate you being here. I hope within the next few months we're able to deal with this crisis and realize that you cannot be taking in 1.5 or 2 million new people, 3 million new people every year without fundamentally changing America. We have something so special here, and I feel like we're letting it slip away. So thank you. With that, without objection, all members have 5 legislative days to submit materials and additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses. If there's no further business without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.